Salutations and welcome, friends, to another episode of Amalfi Sports. I'm your host for this episode, Matthew DeSantis, and today we are previewing an absolutely huge day at Saratoga that includes, get ready folks, the Glen Falls Stakes, the Longinus Test Stakes, the Saratoga Derby, and the crown jewel of the weekend, the Whitney Stakes. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful weekend of racing up at the spa. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone to be on the lookout for Amalfi Sports on your podcast platform of choice, as we'll be launching very soon. And you can have your choice of whether you want to watch or listen to our sports coverage, which goes well beyond horse racing to football, basketball, golf, baseball, fantasy sports, and more. Additionally, starting next week, I'll be adding interviews with figures from across the world of sports, so be on the lookout for those as well. In the meantime, stay up to date with all the daily activity in horse racing by following me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Just this week, I had a contest for $100 worth of souvenirs of Saratoga swag for one lucky follower. Congrats to Ken. And I'll be having more giveaways throughout the racing season. So make sure to follow so you can get the latest on the Sports of Kings and get an opportunity to get some winnings as well. Finally, as I mentioned, this is a huge weekend of racing in general, so I also have preview videos and blog pics for the Friday and Saturday races at Del Mar. So make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and head over to amalfimedia.com to get all of the horse racing content that you need. Now, as always, please make sure to like and comment with your thoughts on the race, and let me know how you think things are going to break down this weekend and share with your fellow horse racing enthusiasts. Okay, let's dive into a huge Saturday at the spa and kick things off with the Glen Falls Stakes, which has a 3:58 p.m. Eastern post time. It's a 1.5 mile distance. It's a grade 2 race for 4-year-olds and up for the fillies and mares. And let's take a look at this field. And of course, the Glen Falls Stakes is on the turf. And this is really interesting 7-horse field that we have. So let's run through the post positions. Starting off at number 1, we have Call Me Love, trained by Christoph Clement, jockeyed by Junior Alvarado. Then Temple City Terror, trained by Brendan Walsh and jockeyed by Tyler Gaffleone. Then you have the morning line favorite, Warlike Goddess, Bill Mott's horse, jockeyed by Julian Leperoux. And then Orglandes, you have the kind of the Chad Brown combos here. This one jockeyed by Irad Ortiz Jr. And then his brother is jockeying the horse in the 5-hole, My Sister Nat. Then you have Delika, a German horse. You don't see many of those, but a very good German horse. Albert Stahl Jr. is the trainer. Miguel Mina is the jockey. And then finally you have Luck Money, trained by Arnaud Delacour and jockeyed by Javier Castellano. So that's the roundup for the Glen Falls Stakes, and this is a very evenly matched field. There's a lot of horses that have competed against each other at different times. They have had mixed results, with one horse coming out on top sometimes, then the next race a different horse will come out on top. We've seen that in particular with horses like Delika and Temple City Tear and Luck Money. A lot of these horses have run against each other. So it's interesting to see that and how they've responded at different lengths and different paces and things along those lines. Now, that said, you might look at this and say, well, it's a turf race. There's 2 Chad Brown horses. You have the Ortiz brothers aboard. Well, we can wrap this one up. That's the exactor right there. Not so fast, I would say. Actually, I don't think these are 2 incredibly strong Chad Brown horses. Although I will say Jose is having a stronger season than Irad, jockeying up there, and I think that's also reflective in the rides. I think Jose's ride this time around, My Sister Nat, is actually a much better horse than Orglandes. So that is something to keep in mind. But I think there is a lot of good horses well beyond that. And the other thing is, Chad Brown is not having the sort of season that he had last year at Saratoga. He's only winning 13% of the times he puts horses out this time around. So certainly doing some winning, but not as dominant as he was over the last few years. So just something to keep in mind. Don't get sloppy with the handicapping and just go with the names and just think, well, this is the done deal. Got to dig into the racing forms a little bit and That's why I'm here, to help you out to understand and decipher all of this stuff. So let's talk about how the race sets up a little bit. I think you'll see both Delika and Call Me Love be the early speed. And both of those horses, I think, are pretty consistent. Delika, I think, is probably a little bit more capable of going wire to wire, has done so in the past at a pretty significant distance. So you can certainly see that happen. Now, it should be noted, because when I had the graphic up, you'd probably notice that several of the horses, 4 of them, in fact, are from Europe or have European breeding. It's important to point out that those horses have almost exclusively been running in the United States over the last at least 2 years, some of them far more than that. So sometimes, and we're going to get to at the Saratoga Derby, some horses that are just coming over for the first time to the United States. That's not the case here in the Glens Falls. These might be European horses, but they have a strong American pedigree in terms of working out here, training here exclusively, and running here exclusively. So they're used to American turf, which can be a little bit firmer, and it's going to be firm at Saratoga this weekend because they've had beautiful weather for the last week, absolutely no rain. So the dirt should be fast, the turf should be firm. So keep that in mind when handicapping as well. Call Me Love is, like I said, the other horse that's going to be out in the lead, I think early. I really like the value that this horse presents in this race at 8-1 morning line odds. I could see this horse being a player in this field. Bigger numbers were last year, certainly, but ran strong last time out. And Christoph Clement is having a really nice season, and honestly is having a better season than Chad Brown at Saratoga. So I like this horse pretty well. This horse also has an amazing tendency to hold position really well. And what do I mean by that? This horse doesn't always win, but amazingly, if this horse gets out second, the horse finishes second. If the horse gets out third, finishes third. It just holds position, doesn't get passed by a lot of horses down the stretch, doesn't necessarily pass a lot of horses herself. So holds that position all the way around the track, which is really unusual for turf racing to see. Usually you see kind of a mad dash at the end and horses are kind of jockeying and moving up and down. You don't really see that with Call Me Love. So a very consistent horse that should be on the lead, and I wouldn't be surprised if stays very close to the lead. Now let's talk a little bit about those 2 Chad Brown horses. I mentioned Orglandes, I think is the weaker of the 2. However, I will say that horse has performed the best when ridden by Irad, of course. So that is kind of an X factor. And if you really have faith in that, certainly go that direction. But I just think this feels a little too strong for Orglandes to overcome some of her deficiencies. My Sister Nat is an improving horse, has not won much here in the United States, but always gets on the board. So again, kind of a safe pick in terms of getting on the board and finishing in that top 3. I'm not sure I have confidence, though, in her winning, but I do have confidence that Jose Ortiz is going to give her a very good ride. Well, let's talk a little bit about Warlike Goddess, who is the morning line favorite. This is the Bill Mott horse. And I tell you, if you have the opportunity, watch the Bewitch at Keeneland last time out. And this horse absolutely blew away Delika down the stretch. It looked like this horse was running on a different track, to be perfectly honest. And so this is a horse that has a great turn of foot, can really put the gas on, and I think is quite impressive. The only downside, and I would say the only note of caution with Warlike Goddess, who, by the way, I'm going to pick to win, I think the only thing to be concerned about, has not run since April. Are you a little concerned about rust potentially? That's certainly in the back of my mind. That said, the horse had a pretty long layoff prior to April, and so, performed well. Just something to think about. Now, there are a couple of horses I haven't mentioned. I haven't mentioned Temple City Terra Luck Money. They just finished second and third behind Delika last time out. I would say of the 2, Temple City Terra certainly has a better shot at getting on the board, but I just don't see either horse as necessarily having the class to win in this field. So how do I see the Glens Falls Stakes breaking down? Well, I have it 3, 5, 1, 6. That means I have Warlike Goddess to win. I have My Sister Nat to place. I have Call Me Love to show. I think that's where you're going to get a little bit of value with Call Me Love. I like that. And then I have Delika coming in 4th to round out the superfecta. So that's how I see the Glens Falls Stakes. Should be a lot of fun. Speaking of a lot of fun, let's move to the next race, the Longinus Test Stakes. And this is for 3-year-old fillies on the dirt, 7 furlongs. This is an exciting race. This is a race very evenly matched. And I think from a handicapping standpoint, offers a lot of potential value, as there are a lot of horses going off at 6 or 8 to 1 who have really good experience and have a lot of class. And so this is the type of race where you can find a lot of value in pairing together horses for exactas, trifectas. You can, I think, do a lot there. I think even win bets can really pay off handsomely in this particular race because there is so much depth in this 3-year-old filly field. So let's take a look at the field, and we will start right off with the number 1 horse, Illumination, trained by Bob Baffert, a name we've not heard in a while in New York. Yes, now that the suspension has been stayed and there is an appeal going on, Bob Baffert is allowed to enter horses in New York. And so here is Illumination entering, with jockeyed by John Velasquez. Then you have the number 2 horse, Super Sensational, trained by Mark Cass and jockeyed by Ricardo Santana Jr. Then Sagel, trained by Todd Pletcher, jockeyed by Joel Rosario. Obligatory, the Bill Mott horse, jockeyed by Jose Ortiz. And then you have another name that you've not seen on the East Coast as well, Always Carina, trained by Chad Brown. And that's right, jockeyed by Flavian Pratt, who's actually flying back to New York for this weekend. That's pretty surprising, leaving Del Mar, where he has just been dominating the California colony, and coming and racing in New York and Saratoga. So that should be a lot of fun to see Flavian go up against the Ortiz brothers, as well as Luis Saez, who have all been having wonderful meets. Then in the 6th hole, you have Making Mischief, also trained by Mark Cass and jockeyed by Tyler Gaffleone. 7th hole, you have Search Results, the other Chad Brown horse, jockeyed by Irad Ortiz Jr. And then Bella Sofia rounds out the group, trained by Rudy Rodriguez and jockeyed by the aforementioned Luis Saez. So let's talk a little bit about this field. And we'll start with Illumination, the Baffert horse. I mean, I think you have to talk about it. Bob Baffert's in New York. That's going to draw a lot of heat one way or the other. And it's funny, there's a narrative on horse racing Twitter and social media that's, Bob Baffert's not doing as well now that, he's been suspended. He's under the spotlight. He's under more scrutiny. Bob Baffert's winning 30% of his races this year in 2021. Bob Baffert's doing just fine. And he's still putting out winners out at Del Mar. So the idea that somehow, because they're cracking down on doping and horse racing, Bob Baffert's not doing well, that's not true. Bob Baffert's doing just fine. Illumination's an interesting horse, though. Reminds me a little bit of Dr. Chevelle from last week, and a horse that had a big jump, and I wonder if she's got another. This is a horse that, posted her best speed number the last time out. And I think it's, there's some question mark as to whether or not that's an anomaly or whether or not that's just progression. Went from a 73 to an 89. So that's a pretty big jump. Now, does she have another one? She's going to need another one if she's going to compete with this field. If she just stays at an 89, 90, not going to cut it. But if she can go from an 89 to a 95, then we're talking about something. But I think that obviously a lot of money is probably going to come in on her just because of Bob Baffert. I mean, there's going to be heat one way or the other. People know the name, and that attracts a lot of bettors one way or the other. So let's move on to some of the other horses in the field that I think have a better chance at winning. And so one of those is Super Sensational, I should say. Last time out was also her best effort by far, went from an 83 to a 95. Great pedigree with Curlin. I will say new jockey, and that's a little concerning in that, she's been ridden by 5 different jockeys now already, and 4 different jockeys in her last 5 races. So I'm always a little worried when I see that. But certainly a good horse, but has lost to some of the other horses in this field recently, Obligatory in particular. So just something to keep in mind when you're looking at Super Sensational. Like I said, a good horse with good pedigree, and certainly it's 6 to 1, very solid odds. But I think there are other horses that offer better value in this field. Speaking of one of those horses, Zahel is the Todd Pletcher horse that improved dramatically last time out. This is a horse that went from basically a 67 buyer speed number to a 96. Now, this is a horse where you kind of question, is there going to be regression? That was a huge jump to make. And is that really what this horse is? That said, at 8-1, I like the value here a lot in terms of pairing this horse with your favorites or on an exacta or a trifecta box. So a lot to like there. The Todd Pletcher, Joel Rosario combo is a winning a lot. And so that's something else to keep in mind. This horse will not have an issue with the distance. The issue that it might have, though, is whether or not if the early speed is too fast, I don't know if Zahel will be able to make up ground the way that she's going to have to in this particular race. And it's just going to be interesting because I think the early speed might actually be an issue. And I wonder if that early speed is too much, then maybe that takes it out of her a little bit. That said, if the early speed is not particularly fast, and by the way, it should be noted that in a lot of the big races at Saratoga this year, the early speed has not been fast. It's been very reasonable clips for most of these major grade stakes races. That sets up, I think, pretty well for Zahel, who's going to master that 7 furlongs without any problem. So a lot to like there with that horse. And I think, again, presents very good value at 8-1. Obligatory, very strong effort last 2 times out under Jose Ortiz. Second by half a length the last time out to Search Results, who we'll get to in a bit. This is another horse should close very strong, but I think actually is kind of the opposite of Zahel, needs a very fast pace. So I think the faster the pace, better for Obligatory, slower the pace, worse. I think this horse kind of relies a little bit on the early speed melting down and being able to really come from off the pace. I think if the early speed is reasonable, I think Obligatory is going to have a tougher time passing by all these horses in the field. Now, one of those horses is Always Karina. And this is a Chad Brown horse. And people think that, again, a lot of misperceptions about Chad Brown. People think Chad Brown on dirt is worth nothing. Well, he's actually winning 24% of his dirt races. So he's doing pretty well. He's got a good return on investment as well. So, there's something there in terms of how he's performing on dirt. However, I think the X factor with Always Karina is Flavien Prat, the jockey. I mean, he's in Saratoga. He's racing against the Ortiz brothers and Luis Saez and Joel Rosario. I mean, he's on such a tear out in California. He has given so many horses such good rides out there. And I'm not just talking about front runners. He has taken horses that were not considered to be particularly strong and put them in great positions. You just saw it last week where he rode Paige Ann, who was going off at almost 20-1, put her in, hit the board with her in a race that, again, great value and just was the perfect trip from Paige Ann. And so he's managed to do this with a lot of horses. I really like Flavien Prat a lot. The other thing is this horse is remarkably consistent. This horse seems to be born to run a 93 or 94 speed number. Just got nabbed by Zahel last time out, but had won the previous 2 races by 14 lengths. That's pretty good. Also has been having very nice 5 furlong workouts. So a lot to like there with Always Karina. Make Mischief is another horse in this field. Nice horse that's more consistent, but has lost to 4 other horses in the field the last 3 times out. So hard to get too excited about Make Mischief in terms of hitting the board or providing much value there. Let's talk about Search Results, who I mentioned earlier. This is a horse that's had a plus 90 buyer speed number the last 4 times out. Again, some of these horses you're talking about making these huge jumps, going from a 70 to a 90, an 80 to a 90. Search Results is just plugging along, kind of like Always Karina, just provides these really strong speed numbers. Only loss ever was to Malafat at 1 1/8 miles. Malafat was an incredible horse, but get this, the outing before that, she actually beat the horse that ended up defeating Malafat at the American Cup Classic a couple weeks ago. So this is a horse that's gone up against great competition and had great success. So a lot to like with search results. Only, as like I said, has ever lost once, and that was at a mile and an eighth. I think at 7 furlongs, very, very tough to beat. And then finally, Bella Sofia. This is a step up in class for Bella Sofia. Good speed, but I just don't think this level of competition is going to yield very positive results for her. Now that said, I think the start position will allow Louis Saez to get her placed well, but I just don't see her being able to finish strong in this stacked of a field. So how do I see the Longinus Test Stakes playing out? Well, honestly, this could play out a lot of different ways. This is maybe the most intriguing race at Saratoga this weekend, in my opinion. I think even more so than the Whitney. But the way I see it, I got to go with Flavien Prat. I'm going with Always Karina to win. I'm going with search results to place. I'm going with Sahel as a little bit of value there on the back end of the trifecta. And then I think obligatory will round out the superfecta. That's how I see the Longinus Test Stakes playing out. Should be a great race. So let's move on to the third of the four big races at Saratoga on Saturday, the Saratoga Derby Invitational, which is a 3-year-old race for on turf, which is a mile and 3/16, and the post time is 5:10 p.m. Well, let's take a look at that field, and this is a huge field. We're not going to talk about every horse in this race, but we have 11 horses in this field. Again, mile and 3/16 on turf for 3-year-olds. Starting off, Soldier Rising, trained by Christophe Clement, jockeyed by Irad Ortiz Jr. Then Du Jour, trained by Bill Mott and jockeyed by Joel Rosario. Palazzi, trained by Mark Cass and jockeyed by Tyler Gaffleone. And then you have Cadillac coming over for the first time, trained by John Harrington and jockeyed by Shane Foley. Yes, This Time, trained by Kelly Breen, jockeyed by Louis Saez. Then you have the winner of the Belmont Derby, Bolshoy Ballet, trained by the classic Aidan O'Brien, with the jockey, of course, Ryan Moore. Then Street Protector, trained by Charles Appleby, who has had a lot of success recently, and jockeyed by Hall of Famer Mike Smith. Then Cellist, trained by George Arnold II, jockeyed by Julian Leperoux. Then State of Rest, trained by Joseph O'Brien, jockeyed by John Velasquez. Flashiest, trained by Leonard Powell, jockeyed by Jose Lezcano. And then finally, a very intriguing horse that we'll talk a little bit about, King Fury, trained by Ken McPeak and jockeyed by Jose Ortiz. So that's the field for the Saratoga Derby. And a lot of the horses that I just mentioned were in the Belmont Derby that I previewed last month. So some of you who've been watching this for the last month or so, you know how I feel about some of these horses. And you know how much I liked Bolshoy Ballet going into the Belmont Derby. That's not exactly a tough pick to make. It was morning line favorite, but still a lot of the same horses. But we do have some new faces that I think will shake some things up. So let's talk about a couple of the horses in the field. I'll mention Du Jour. This is a horse that I really liked last time out at the Belmont Derby and ended up finishing fourth, but didn't really have a kick at the end. And considering that this was the furthest that he'd ever gone, it's hard for me to think that he's suddenly going to outkick this field at a longer distance. I like to look for horses with value, and I like to look at horses that are going off between 6 and 10 to 1 at the morning line odds. And Du Jour has some name recognition and some decent placements and finishes, but I just don't think this is the way to go if you're looking for some value in this field. Now, let's move to a horse that is attracting a lot of money, Cadillac. This is a horse that is coming over for the first time to the United States, hasn't gone the distance before, which is a little surprising for European horses because typically European horses usually go a little bit further distance than many of the American horses. And I should say that Cadillac has been over to the United States once before, did run at Keeneland last year, but otherwise has only run overseas. And so, again, a horse that has never run this distance and also has never run on anything better than good turf surface. This is a horse that is used to a softer turf over in Europe. That's interesting to me. And it was always a little concerning. And what I'll say is when he came over and ran at Keeneland last year on the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, finished fourth. Now, granted, that's a very good field, grade 1 field. No disrespect in finishing there. But I'm always worried about horses that are used to a softer turf. Like I said, the Delmont or the Saratoga turf is going to be strong. It's going to be firm. And so how this horse responds to a firm turf, I think is interesting. Additionally, if you look at the time form rating speed numbers, which is what they have over in Europe, they do not compare to what Bolshoy Ballet has put up in the past. Bolshoy Ballet has been run, his high end is significantly higher than what Cadillac has put up over in Europe. So I just don't love this horse for the price. Perfectly good horse. I have no problem with the horse itself. I think it's a competitive horse. I just don't love that it's going off at 4-1. I just think there's a lot better value out there. And I just don't think Cadillac, I think there are a lot of question marks there that I don't have answers to. And I don't think we'll have answers to until the race is over. So let's move to one of the horses that I do not have many questions about, which is Bolshoy Ballet. And this is the horse that, of course, won the Belmont Derby last time out. And interestingly enough, I went back and watched that because I was not as blown away with that performance in the moment as I was with Santa Barbara, which was the other Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore horse that won the Belmont Oaks that day. Santa Barbara, incredible run, was boxed in the whole way around and then just had one little opening of daylight and went off and just see ya. I mean, just left the field behind. Bolshoy Ballet didn't seem at first to be quite as impressive. I went back and watched that. Did not have the cleanest trip. Really had to swing out wide. Come in the home stretch, was middle of the pack most of the way, but really did outkick the field the last quarter of a mile. Now if there's one red flag, it's that his only race at this distance, he did tire a little bit over in Europe, but it should be pointed out that that was on good to soft turf. So that might have contributed to it a little bit. But I think, Bolshoy Ballet proved to be the class of these horses a month ago at Belmont. There's no reason to think that he's not going to be able to continue to be the class again. I do think, they're bringing in some new horses to challenge Bolshoy Ballet, but I really do like this horse quite a bit. And having come from over in Europe, also very accustomed to running on a shorter schedule. So it's not going to bother him to come back and run a month later. Now let's talk a little bit about Soldier Rising. This is a horse that turf conditions are a question, but this horse can handle the distance. That is not a problem at all. And I like horses that can handle a distance, particularly when you're talking about 1 mile and 3/16. That's important to see horses that have gone that distance or longer before. So I do like quite a bit about this. Now, that said, the other reason I like this horse at 12-1, I love those odds. I love that value. And Christophe Clement, like I mentioned before, is having a really strong season at Saratoga. The inside rail position might not be great. A lot of people talk about the dead rail at Saratoga, but this is a horse that's trained on Saratoga's turf when it's been firm the last 2 times out and seems to be taking to it nicely. So I really like Soldier Rising in your exactas and trifectas, in your exotic bets to add a little bit of value because I think this is a horse that will perform quite well, and I'm not worried about this horse tiring at all down the stretch. Now let's talk a little bit about Street Protector. This is the Godolphin owned and Appleby trained horse. And where have we heard that before at Saratoga? Well, we heard it just a few weeks ago at the Diana when Althika and Summer Romance finished 1-2, both owned by Godolphin, both trained by Appleby. And then also we heard Adiyar over at Ascot winning the King George VI just a couple of weeks ago as well. Again, Godolphin owned, Appleby trained. That's a very hot combination. This horse has run on good to firm turf, has posted very strong time form numbers that are comparable to what Bolshoy Ballet was running over in Europe. The question here is, can Street Protector handle the distance? And it's a little bit of a step up in class for Street Protector, but at 6-1, I do like the value. Mike Smith has had a couple shaky rides out west, but in a distance turf race, I'm a little less concerned about that. And so I do like Street Protector quite a bit, particularly, like I said, at that value. And the final horse that I'll just mention in passing is King Fury. This is a horse of real X factor. First time out on turf. And this horse was doing fine on dirt, which is why it's kind of surprising that suddenly he turns up on turf. Has never run on turf before. and most recently finished second to Masquerade at the Ohio Derby. And we just saw Masquerade perform, I think, admirably at the Jim Dandy last week at Saratoga. But King Fury's a horse that was posting 95 plus buyer speed numbers on dirt and had won $300,000. This is a horse that had a lot going for it, I thought. But clearly Ken McPeat and maybe the ownership group wants to move to turf. Maybe they see a brighter future there for the horse. Certainly Jose Ortiz will give it a good ride, and at 10-1 provides some potential value at a long shot. But just again, a lot that we don't know there with King Fury, how it's going to respond to turf at Saratoga. So how do I see the Saratoga Derby playing out? Well, I see Bolshoy Ballet winning. I trust that Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore combination. So I see Bolshoy Ballet winning, Street Protector coming in second, Soldier Rising coming in third, and then Cadillac rounding out the superfecta. So I have a 6-7-1-4. All right. Enough of all the preliminaries. Let's get to the granddaddy of the day, the Whitney, which is, of course, going off at post time 5:48 p.m. at 1 1/8 for 4-year-olds and up on on dirt, I should say. And this is a small but highly impressive field. So let's take a look. And it's not going to take long because, like I said, it's only a 5-horse race. 1 1/8 on dirt for 3-year-olds. We'll start with By My Standards, trained by Will Calhoun and jockeyed by Gabriel Saez. And then we have Silver State, trained by Steve Asmussen and jockeyed by Ricardo Santana. Swiss Skydiver, trained by Ken McPeat and jockeyed by Irad Ortiz Jr. And then the morning line favorite, Knicks Go, trained by Brad Cox and jockeyed by Joel Rosario. And finally, very close second favorite, Maxfield, trained by Brendan Walsh and jockeyed by Jose Ortiz. So let's talk a little bit about this race. This is an impressive field, an exciting field, and a 5-horse race. There's a lot of things that can happen there. It's always interesting to see how they play out, who takes the early speed, who can sit off of that. Let's start with By My Standards. The big question here is, can this horse recapture last year's form? Last year was throwing up some great speed numbers, winning a lot of races, looking really good. Hasn't recaptured that same form yet, but has been rounding into shape. And in a loaded field, we'll see how this plays out. Now, the other thing that's fascinating to me about By My Standards, and I think this is something we'll just have to see how the race plays out in a lot of ways. This is a horse that went from being kind of an early, I don't want to say the early speed, but being right on the early speed, typically sat second or third. You saw that. That's how the horse ran last year. In almost all those races, ran right on the lead, second or third. This year, the horse has become more of a stalking horse, has been 5th, 6th position, and then giving a kick the last few furlongs. Different riding style, a change in riding style. I'll be honest, this horse had more success when it sat right off the pace than it did coming from the middle of the pack. So it'll be fascinating to me to see what's the strategy with Gabriel Saez, what's the strategy with Brad Cox. Do they put this horse near the speed, which is going to be Knicks Go? So do they put this horse right by Knicks Go? Or do they decide to hold off and sit a little further back? Now, in a 5-horse field, you can only be so far back. But still, are they going to be more in that 3, 4, 5 slot, or are they going to be right there with Knicks Go keeping up? It'll be fascinating to see. Silver State, let's move to the number 2 horse. 4 for 4 this year, 7 for 11 in his career. Only one at this distance, but when stretched out, it's not been an issue. And more importantly, he's not weakened when he's gone longer than 1 1/8. So a lot to like with this horse. Again, this is a horse that will likely stalk the early pace, will come from off the pace, which is, of course, going to be Knicks Go. But this is a horse that's posting very strong speed numbers and has, like I said, won the last 4 races and won combined the last 6 times out. So an incredibly impressive horse that just keeps winning. Just got off a grade 1 win at the Metropolitan. And again, a lot to like here. Beat By My Standards by a length the last time out. Beat Mischievous Alex, who's a pretty good horse, although threw in a little bit of a clunker last week. But still, Silver State, very, very good horse, and something to consider there. That's going to be staying right off the pace of Nick's Go. Now let's move to the 3-horse Swiss Skydiver, and this is a horse that has a bit of a cult of personality online. Of course, people will remember this was the Preakness winner last year, the filly that went up against the boys and won the race, kind of like Rachel Alexandra all those years ago. So understandable, this is a horse that has gotten a lot of attention. The interesting thing about Swiss Skydiver to me is that even when Swiss Skydiver loses to really good horses. So when the losses are to Monomoy Girl, Latruska, She Dares the Devil, these are really good horses. And similarly, beaten very good horses, beaten Authentic, beaten Harvey's Little Goal. So I really like Swiss Skydiver. She doesn't have the top end speed. I mean, she's coming off a third place finish last time. But this is a horse that has been running exclusively Grade 1 races the last 6 times out. So she's not going to be intimidated by this field. And at 1.1 1/8, she can do the distance. That's not a problem. She did 1 mile and 3/16 at the Preakness and won. And so, again, a lot to like here with Swiss Skydiver. It's a strong field, and she's got a great record going up against the boys and winning. So I do like this horse a lot. It's hard not to like this horse. It's hard not to like a filly going up against the boys. So let's go to talk about Nick's Go, which is the 4th horse in this field. And listen, when I started doing these previews, one of the things I wanted to do, I didn't want to be one of these hot take people. I didn't want to be one of these people that just came out and started saying things just to get clicks, just to get attention. I wanted to be measured, smart about this, and analytical. But I'm going to start. I think Nick's Go is a fraud. I do not like this horse. And there's a lot of reasons I don't like this horse. And I should say, I don't dislike the horse. I love horses. So I like the horse. But in terms of racing in this particular field, I just don't like it. I don't see it. People are going to look at the Beyer speed numbers and they're going to go, whoa, 113 Beyer speed number last time out. I mean, good Lord, what an amazing number. Horse ran in Nebraska against nobody. Okay, that horse has run against, to say mediocre competition is to give a lot of credit to mediocre. This is a horse that has not run against great competition. And when it has run against good competition, has lost. Finished 4th to Silver State, by my standards, Mischievous Alex. Finished 4th behind Mischief, Charlatan, Great Scott over in England. Okay? This is a horse, beat Jesus Team. Okay. It just, Rated R Superstar, Last Judgment. I mean, these are not great horses that has been put away. So, so it goes to Nebraska and runs a huge number. Okay. I watched that race. It was not as impressive as you'd think. I'm surprised it didn't decide to go to Manitoba and win by, run a 120 Beyer speed number next, or something like that. Just keep going west. I just don't think this horse has gone up against the best competition. Now, listen, I may have to eat crow on this. I may have to look like the dumbest guy in the room when Nick's Go wins this race by, 5 lengths going away. But Nick's Go is going to set the early pace. And the thing is, Nick's Go doesn't usually set an unreasonable early pace. It's not like he goes out and blisters the field. He runs, 23 and 3, 23 and 4. I mean, he's not killing the field early on. So he's going to set the pace. But I just think this field has way too much depth and class and can run him down and smoke him. And that's exactly what happened in the Metropolitan, where he set an early pace. And guess what? Silver State, by my standards, Mischievous Alex all caught up with him and passed him. See ya. It's easy to win the Cornhusker Stakes out in Nebraska. It's a little more difficult to win when you're going up against these horses at the Whitney at Saratoga. So we'll see. I got a little agitated there about Nick's Go. I love horses and I like the horse itself. I just don't like the horse in this particular race and against this particular field. Part of the reason I don't like it, Maxfield. I love Maxfield. 7 for 8 lifetime. Only loss was at 1.25 miles, and you can argue that he just ran out of room. The distance wasn't the problem. That horse was coming. So Maxfield is a great horse. Now, it hasn't crushed great competition this year. So you could easily use a similar argument that I just used with Knicks Go. Maxfield has not beaten great competition. Certainly beat very good competition last year. Beat horses like Governor Morris and things like that. So beat very strong horses last year. This is a horse that will sit from off the pace and then go. And when it goes, see you later. I really like Maxfield. Again, this is a Godolphin-owned horse. I also trust Jose Ortiz a little bit more than I trust Joel Rosario, who's going to be on Knicks Go. And so for that reason, the way I see the Whitney playing out, I think it's going to go 5-3-2-4. I think it's going to go Maxfield to win, Swiss Skydiver to place, Silver State to show, and I think Knicks Go is going to finish fourth. And I can already hear people yelling at me about this that I don't know what I'm talking about. We'll see. I may have to come back Saturday night and post an apology video. But, like I said, that's just the way I see it. I just don't think this horse, Knicks Go, I think against this level of competition, there are some questions that I have. We'll just have to see how it plays out. But listen, folks, that's it for today. A huge day at Saratoga, obviously. I hope you enjoyed the preview of the huge day on the card. And make sure to also check out the corresponding blog post for all of my picks on the Amalfi Media website for the races at Saratoga, and also my preview videos for the races at Friday and Saturday at Del Mar. And finally, just remember to subscribe to Amalfi Media on YouTube, follow me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace, and check out AmalfiMedia.com for all the great horse racing content you need to get through the Breeders' Cup and beyond. Until next time, I'm Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.